Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good to see that everybody is already seated, nice and quiet. Welcome to this forum. We have our guest today, our independent member for Murchison, Ruth Forrest. Welcome, Ruth, thank you. Our mayor, I was wrong, I said in the past acting, but he's not acting. Our mayor, Vernon Philbey. President of the King Island Shipping Executive, Greg Morris. The President of the Chamber of Commerce, Rosemary, Hallett. We have Lyttle from the King Island Beef Group, and we have Warren Dick from Launceston, the Managing Director of Eastern Line Shipping. I know with the comments we've seen over the last couple of weeks that a lot of people were a bit like, what do we do this for? Because we have been about shipping for how long now, and it never changes and it never gets better. I would like to invite Ruth Forrest to have a say. Thank you, Ruth.
Okay, well, thanks, Wade, and I really appreciate all of you turning up tonight. I know it's never a perfect time for people, and I really do appreciate you being here tonight. I'm really here to hear from as many people on the island as I can. I've been hearing about shipping issues since I was elected in the first time in 2005. Then it was more about the Sea Road Mersey ship, which was reliable, but sometimes the costs were a major issue. I think looking back, probably that was a better service than we've got now in many respects, but often we don't appreciate what we've got till it's gone. Anyway, we are where we are, and that decision was made by Sea Road to take that vessel off the line. And I remember back then, when that decision was being made, that there was discussions and talk about increasing the size of the Grassy Harbour to take bigger vessels, and that all became too hard. The cost of the upgrade to the breakwater there went from $14 million one week to effectively 21 the next. And I thought, I wonder what sort of rocks we're using for that. And since then, it's sort of really all been put in the too hard basket. Part of that was because the Shillite mine didn't actually get going when we thought it might have, and the overburden wasn't going to be available, which would have offset some of the costs. But we look now, we've got Group 6 metals pretty much underway, not without their challenges with shipping as well, I might add, and there's an opportunity presents itself. So I think, from my perspective, I'm really keen to hear what your thoughts are as a community about what your key challenges are, not just related to shipping, but other things too we can get to as well. But particularly what it is that you think the actual problem is. I mean, I think I know, but I'm not going to presume. And what you think the key levers are that I can pull as a representative of this place, not being in government, but able to speak freely, to try and address some of the really key issues for you. The problem, I think, and I've been asking a series of questions, and I know Wade's been covering them well on the radio and in the newspaper. There's been really great coverage of that. And I've had some discussions with Minister Ferguson since his visit over here. It seems to me that he still believes there's actually not a problem. He thinks it's still working pretty much fine. And yes, there's vested interests and things like that often have a part to play. But I mean, everyone has a vested interest in this service and how it works for the community. King Island per capita put more into the Tasmanian economy than any other part. And I think we should not overlook that. We should remember the contribution that King Island makes. And the fact that it's a remote island should not be a disadvantage to people living here and contributing to our economy. So I get very frustrated when I hear comments that suggest that because you choose to live, or you do live, or your work requires you to live in a remote area, that you have to accept something less than fair. No other Tasmanians are required to buy their products directly from Tasmania. They source them from the mainland for products that aren't available in Tasmania particularly. And you as Tasmanians should be able to make those similar choices without being penalised. Now, most of you would be aware that I did chair a parliamentary committee inquiry into shipping services in 2017, and we found in that what was needed was a triangulated service, and a triangulated service that went in both directions. Not every day. Everyone knows the freight task is not that large. But so the people who wanted to ship stock or product to Victoria or into the mainland markets could do that without having to transship through Tasmania. And similarly, to ship directly from the island to Tasmania where your markets were there. That was the recommendation of the committee. It was generally agreed by the government. They then made the decision to establish Bass Island Line. I still struggle with the concept of giving a port the task of running a shipping service when we actually had a shipping company who does run ships called T2 Line. But here we are, I've got a port running a shipping service. That was the decision that was made. It has been underwritten by Tasports generally to make that service continue. I haven't seen this year's financial figures yet to see how that's going, but the decision to remove the triangulated service was based on ongoing significant losses to Bass Island Line and thus to Tasports. So I'm really keen to hear about the impact those decisions have had on you as consumers on the island, businesses on the island and business people on the island, and what you think the most appropriate model should be. There was an expression of interest for commercial operators to take over the route, but as I understand, what the terms of reference for that review or call for expressions of interest was that the expectations was that the person would take over Bass Island Line, which to me means you take over the ship. Now, I'm not sure that anyone particularly would want to be keen to take over a ship that was never fit for purpose in the first place. The Minister tells me the ship is fit for purpose. It does a good job, it's very timely and arrives reliably. So I'm not sure how many here would agree with that statement, but I haven't met anyone yet in all my time on King Island since the Bass Island Line's been online that actually agrees with that. So if there's someone around who can inform me otherwise, I'll be really pleased to hear it, and I'll tell the Minister that he's right. There's some people who do think that, but the majority of them don't. So these are the things that I constantly struggle up against, I guess. I won't give up on doing what I can to support this community. And for my role particularly, that means continuing to ask questions on your behalf about the matters that really matter to you. And obviously a really key one is shipping, because it affects everything you do on the island. It affects your input costs for your farming. It affects your shipping costs to get product on and off the island. It affects the fuel that everyone relies on and the cost of living as a consequence. I think all of us accept there will be a higher cost of living on a remote island or remote part in Tasmania, including the West Coast, for example. But there needs to be an equity in that, and I think that's what we need to be focusing on. So I don't wish to speak too much more about it. I really would like to hear from you and hear from our other panellists who have the very lived and real experience on the island. But as I said, I'm also happy to talk about other matters of importance to you outside of this issue, but acknowledging this is a pretty big issue and it encompasses pretty much everything that you do and how you live on King Island. So thanks for your time. I've got a pretty full schedule over the next couple of days too. I've had a busy day today, so I really do appreciate people taking the time. If for some reason I can't catch up with you personally this visit, I will be back, and I'm always happy to chat to you on the phone or communicate via email. So feel free to reach out. I always try and respond in a timely manner, unless the email disappears down a list of hundreds. But thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing your comments and contribution.
Can I ask you a few questions, Ruth? Sorry. You've been asking, and thank you for that, been asking a lot of questions on behalf of the King Island community in the Legislative Council over the last few months. In general, what has been your experience with the answers you received from the Minister, probably put together by Tasports, we may guess, but the answers you received?
Just the process of asking questions in the Legislative Council, the upper house, is we don't have the Minister responsible for infrastructure and transport in our house. That's, as you know, Mr Ferguson. So I write the questions. They're notionally without notice, we call them, but that means I give some notice, write to him, and then he's supposed to answer within 24 hours. That's fairly optimistic. But anyway, we do get an answer. Sometimes it takes much longer than 24 hours. So the question is then sent through a leader's office, the leader of government in our house, and it goes to the minister's office, and then the minister, if he needs or she needs to get advice from another department or a government business, in this case Tasports, it's sent to them for comment. And then the answer comes back, and I can't, there's no point asking a question if there is no answer, so we just wait until we're told the answer is ready. So I did get 2 answers to questions I asked a couple of weeks ago now, just this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to really digest them, but they were around the breakup of the fuel cost and other aspects related to the negotiations around an alternate provider of the shipping service and meetings and commitments made to Eastern Shipping Line. But effectively, the questions are often avoided directly. I'll get some vague other answer that sort of goes to the point but not to the question, and so I have to go back and ask further questions. And I'm happy to keep playing that game because, as I said, I don't give up. It is a bit frustrating. I get very frustrated when I get told quite often in questions related to financial performance, particularly in this case where we're having a subsidised system to fund Basalt Online. Tasports are having to carry the loss of Basalt Online. I did say on the ABC this morning they were making a profit. That was an error. They're actually making a loss, and I will correct that tomorrow morning if I talk to them. Rob, my husband, did point that out after I got off the interview. But in those circumstances, I guess they often come back with the answer that's commercial in confidence or commercially sensitive information, which I find internally frustrating when this is money that belongs to the taxpayers. And what I was asking for was not dollar amounts, it was percentage breakdown of the costs. And so it is entirely frustrating. The answer I got in relation to the fuel prices doesn't give me percentages, as I asked. It gives an overall cost. So very frustrating. I'm sure you would get the same answer in the House of Assembly if a member down there was to ask. But we've just got to keep pushing on. And the other option, which I will consider pursuing after they release their financials this year and their annual report, is to call them into a committee hearing. And I chair a committee that has the power to do that. And that will be another opportunity. So I'll be really listening to your points tonight to see if there's things that should be raised in that process if I don't get answers the other way.
Thank you, Ruth. I'd like to invite our Mayor, Vernon Philbey.
Thanks, Ruth, and thanks everybody for turning up today. It's good to see a good roll-up. I'll start with the shipping group. All our members decided to form the group, and then they decided to have the executive so they could deal with the Tasports. So I was elected with Thor Clemens to be from the council. The council was going to have 2 representatives, and then there was Greg, Rosemary, who else was there? G6 Metals, Chas Metal, and Robbie Payne. No, that's on the executive. I'll go back to before the election. I approached the government now and asked them when you were going to talk shipping, and they said they'd come back after 6 weeks after the election if they were elected. Well, that took about 6 to 8 months, and they sent Tasports over. There was an interesting talk because I got the feeling they weren't not interested in our costs or anything. So then we decided we'd invite the minister, and he arrived. Well, that was a different story again. I got the impression straight away they weren't interested in King Island or the breakwater rock. They just weren't interested. And it gets very frustrating for Greg and the rest of the executive that we just don't seem to be getting anywhere. We told them about the costs of transshipping and the extra handling. They just took it on notice. And in March, they sent us the costings of all the transshipping costs, and it was going up from 25 to 50%. They just didn't have an answer. We just have to wear it. And that's their attitude. I find that when we had the last meeting with the minister, the member for Braddon was there, and after the meeting he said, well, that was a waste of time. and that's the feeling we've had all along. And that's why we've got Ruth to come on board and try and ask some questions on our fuel and our costs. Because since transshipping's happened, you all know the costs. We're all wearing it. And any questions, Wade?
Well, as you stated that the Minister was here and the reception wasn't too well, I believe also that the Minister promised the Shipping Executive and yourself and Council that he would look into the fuel cost to the island and would come back to you. Have we heard anything? Or?
No, we haven't heard a thing. No.
That's
nothing.
a common thing, isn't it, almost?
No, he hasn't mentioned it at all. I might have spoke to Julie, but he hasn't spoke to me.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Mayor Vernon Philbey. Now I'd like to invite our Shipping Executive President, Greg Morris.
Yes, again, thank you, Wade, and thank you, Ruth, for coming over. It has been a long road and a long battle. I thank Ruth for her input and, I guess, timely involvement with the inquiry that was made. There's a lot came out of that. And once again, the promises and assurances to get us off the back of the government was the promise of a triangulated service, and also that the second vessel would be an interim vessel until a purpose-built vessel to suit the Bass Strait and King Island was to be commissioned. Now, when the vessel was chosen, it wasn't chosen for King Island, it was chosen as a fuel tanker. It was a landing craft with 1 million litres capacity to cart fuel. The idea and the business model was around bulk fuel into Tasmania for Tasport's own purpose. Now that was knocked on the head, so we ended up with a vessel that was purely designed to meet another objective, and it was never able to provide a triangular service because Tasports weren't prepared to take it across Bass Strait direct. It was only able to be used to shuttle between Tasmania and King Island, or King Island and Victoria. It wasn't deemed safe enough to attempt to go straight across Bass Strait. They only admitted that probably 12 to 18 months after they got it. I see in one of the responses to Ruth where they claim that they're going to get the AMC to remodel the vessel for Bass Strait. When the vessel was first announced, we requested a copy of the modelling that the claim had been done to assess whether we felt the vessel was suitable so that we as a community could have a contingency. We know what stocks of empty containers to have on hand, to know what amount of grain and fertiliser to stock on the island. But the argument they gave back to us was, sorry, we've already bought it, there's no much point giving you that information. We were never able to view the assessment of that vessel. Now, what seems to be behind that is what the Minister said in Parliament, the Minister at the time of Transport, Marine Hidding. He said if those King Islanders think they're going to be able to get their cattle to Victoria, it's never going to happen. So you wonder that choosing a vessel that wasn't capable of going across Bass Strait to take cattle was more a political decision on behalf of the state government, not for the residents of King Island. Now, regarding the shipping group and how it's been portrayed and received by the government and Bass Island Line, we are and have been the lead organisation when it came to shipping. When it went to market the first time to assess a vessel, the shipping group took the service to the market as Sea Road Mersey was pulling out. We spent probably 12 to 18 months prioritising a minimum service requirement, etc., etc. Sea Road at that time chose not to pull out and walked away and said, no, we'll keep running the vessel for another couple of years. So we went back to the market again, we got the interest, we had someone lined up, we spent 12 months with them, went through exactly our service requirements with bulk fuel, access to Victoria, vehicles undercover. We went through everything as a minimum service requirement for King Island. When it came time, the government took it off us and said, no, we'll take it to market. We're not going to work with the people we've already worked with, we'll take it to market. The King Island community was deemed to have a pecuniary interest, so no one from the shipping group was able to be on that committee to assess the service. We were pushed aside. Basically, they knew that we wouldn't accept other than a service with an ocean-going vessel that included Victoria. Since that time, any communication between the government, Tasports, Bass Island Line and the shipping group has been fiercely undermined. When They first came, they wanted not to meet with the shipping group. They wanted a list of all the people involved in the shipping group so they could meet them individually. They weren't prepared to meet with the shipping group as an entity. After that, what happened was that they'll meet with singly with either the mayor or the chairman of the shipping group. Most of what was shared was either in confidential or we kept it in private, so then the chair of the shipping group or the mayor weren't able to share that with either the council or with our other members. So basically we've been hamstrung. Now, that is why executive was formed with council, because it's been a divide and conquer since day one, because they know they don't want to hear our message, and the government, I'm very disappointed in our current Premier, because I personally approached him 18 months ago and said, look, the process that you're going through with Tasports, where you've given Tasports purely the role of choosing and looking for shipping service, I understood that shipping service would be a shipping service that suited Tasports, not King Island. And that's been proven. How come they get 6 lots of wharfage out of every container that comes out of Victoria before it gets to us? How come the stevedoring costs at Grassy have doubled since Tasports providing the stevedoring? So Tasports is doing quite well out of King Island. All right, Bass Island line's struggling, but Tasports is doing very well. And Tasports aren't going to bring bulk fuel in whilst they can bring in fuel in containers and make 3 or 4 times as much out of it. Why would they bring bulk fuel in? So we're really up against it. But we're hanging in there, and the executive, I believe, now we've got a message from Tasports just now saying that they will meet with the executive now, but if they don't give us an answer, if they're not honest, and in responses in Parliament are basically bagging the executive and the mayor, are totally inappropriate. And they say we shouldn't be going to the media, but they've left us little choice. We've done it quietly, we've done it softly, we've played by their games, but they keep lying to us. So I'm very disappointed in our government. I mean, Tasports probably given a poison chalice, but it's only because TT Line wouldn't touch it with a bar of soap that they got forced to take it on. They had a bit more balls and stood up to the government. Anyway, I better leave it at that. Any more questions?
Well, I was wondering, Greg, that I just received an email that Tasports are now prepared to look at the shipping executive in a little bit more serious. Have you got that information? Where did that... This is what I was told yesterday, and I found it quite surprising.
Well, we've had no response to any of the questions we put to Tasports from our last meeting. There was promise they were going to summarise the so-called $280,000 savings we're going to get out of the service from Tassie. There's several other issues. We want, how long it's going to take to amortise the facility at Devonport. Those things from 3-4 months ago. They haven't responded to those.
How many questions can go in a container? Because they're saying that they're bringing more containers to the island, but we have container loads full of questions, isn't it?
Well, that's relevant only because it looks more, because previously it would have to look more. They're only sailing out of Tasmania at this time last year. It was only sailing once every 3 weeks out of Tassie. So it's only the freight from Victoria coming via Devonport that's giving them the numbers.
Anyway, thank you very much for that, Greg Morris, President of the King Island Shipping Executive. Would now like to ask Rosemary Hallett, President of the Chamber of Commerce here on the island and Manager of Foodworks, to say a few words.
Thanks everybody for coming, and thank you, Ruth. Just to explain from a business house point of view how it all works, we mainly buy out of Victoria, all the businesses on King Island, or 90% of them, and things are getting transshipped now where they weren't before. We buy because the prices are cheaper in Victoria. Our warehouses are mainly in Victoria. If we were to buy out of Tasmania, we would lose a lot of our promotional buys and so forth. We try to give our customers the best price possible. A regular service makes it very difficult for staffing, having your staff on call to come in when the boat may arrive, whereas we had in the past a very regular service. this refrigerator container issue. I couldn't even get a price out of them until early September, even though apparently the service was running from July. And the price would be only slightly cheaper, but it could ruin the airline services that we have coming to the island. So I let them know that I would not be using that service, and that's about it.
Now, Rose, BIL introduced reefer containers, as you mentioned, the refrigerator containers, already in June. We found out during question time, questions asked by Ruth Forrest. You guys knew too, didn't you, that they were going to use it?
No, Wade, we didn't. The first we had heard was when Anthony Donald came to a shipping executive meeting and he asked the question, would it be used? Everyone looked at me and I said, well, depending on the cost, but I would be concerned about the impact on the services we already have in place. Then when the minister was over, again, he mentioned that, and apparently that was about the only thing he heard out of our meeting from his answer to Ruth. So the day after I heard Ruth's questions and answers, I rang, who are they? Bass Island Line, and got Tas Cargo, who said, oh, you've jumped the gun, we're just going in a meeting now to work out the costs. By the end of the day, we had a price, which, as I said, was only marginally cheaper than what it is to fly it in.
But aren't you surprised then that they don't get in contact with the shop owners first? And they keep talking about stakeholders, and I'm sure elders would sell you steaks, but who are the stakeholders?
It surprised me. It surprised everybody. That's why I rang. I thought, well, I'll just go straight to the top and find out what's going on.
There's also talk, has often been, that the John Dugan not be a suitable barge, couldn't call it a ship, due to service King Island. Now, there's often have been delays. Those delays, have they got an impact for you as a manager of a supermarket?
Oh yes, it has a delay on everybody, the building industry, all the industries. You don't know when things are coming in. And staffing's an issue. We don't like to stand our staff down, but if there's no work for them, it's very difficult to justify them being there. But I know Phil and I both try to keep our staff as employed as we can. It just holds up the whole system. You either get it early or late, or one load or two loads, or we'll just see what pops out this week.
Rosemary, Hallett, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I would like to invite the president of the King Island Beef Group, Nick Lyttle. Nick?
Thanks, Wade, and thanks for coming over, Ruth. This will be fairly brief, but just from the beef industry perspective, how the shipping's affecting it. It's probably worth noting that the beef industry on King Island contributes about 20% of Tasmania's total processor volume of beef, so it's pretty significant. There's approximately 40,000 animals sold off King Island per year, and that includes the store cattle to feedlots. You could say that's about 1,000 trailers goes out, so it's a huge freight task for the boats. So Bass Island Line started in 2017, and it only carried livestock for a short amount of time, and it wasn't until March 22 when it changed to its south-only sailing to Devonport, using the Ro-Ro facility that was specifically made for it, that they began carrying cattle. Only one of the processors used the Bass Island Line. In saying that, it is much more efficient for that processor to use it. So therefore, the only consistent north sailing for livestock has been Eastern Line shipping. And with that, they have to wait till the boat's full to head there. The Ro-Ro facility that they have been using, it has been a lot more efficient to load animals onto, as opposed to years ago when they used to load them onto the pens. So I guess the major issue with the triangular sailing, or the lack thereof, is, I guess, the pressure in autumn to get a lot of the store cattle off and cull cows. A lot of the producers here are spring calving beef herds, so that means they have to squeeze as little amount of animals through the pinch of winter as they can. So they need to offload between February and June is the peak time for the shipping the cattle off. And the lack of the triangular sailing means there's probably not as much access or harder to get access to the feedlots on the mainland for store cattle. And it can also mean that the producers on King Island take a penalty because the Tassie market can take a bit of a dive. It can often be $1 a kilo different to the mainland. So you're at the mercy of that by not having a regular triangular shipping and a reliable one. I guess in that the animal welfare probably comes into it. It is a fair hike with the current services that we have to get back to the mainland. If we had a single operator with a larger ship, we could get more animals off more efficiently. Could be a quicker journey for the animals. Therefore, probably better grading and all the rest. So if the farmers have to, a lot of the time that rush comes from that February to June. Farmers have to hold stock for longer than they needed to. They could eat into their fodder reserves for winter. It can put pressure on all the other animals, and then I guess there's just the flow-on effects with there could be even the mental health aspect of that too, just having to see the animals go backwards or hold. And then not having sailing from the north as much it just makes it a bit harder to get our seed stock in. It probably limits the ability of island producers to trade cattle. Like, there could be opportunities occasionally. It might be a bit droughty over away and you fill up a couple of trailers and come here with it. So that's sort of, those opportunities are probably eliminated a bit. That's, I think that sums it up, Wade.
I would like to know who decides for the farmers which shipping service, because we've got two services, which shipping service is used for your particular cattle to go to a particular abattoir. Is that the abattoir or?
Yeah, so I guess because Eastern Line sails into Stanley, that just makes sense for Greenhams to use that, pretty close to Smithton. And now Bass Island Line has started going into Devonport, so it's a short trip to Longford, as opposed to prior to March 22, both processes were using Eastern Line, so there was a fair hike down to Longford for road travel for JBS.
Were the beef farmers informed when JBS decided to go with BIL again after a lengthy time of not using that service for the cattle?
Not having first-hand experience there, but I believe they were. Oh, okay. As in JBS customers, yeah.
But the farmers themselves have actually no say in it. If you said, no, we want to keep using this service or that service, you have no say.
Well, I guess not, but that probably just dictates who you sell through. Yeah, so if you wanted to sell through JBS but you wanted to use Eastern Line, you're dictated by that, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. I would like to ask Mr. Warren Dick from Eastern Line Shipping, the Managing Director, to say a few words.
Thanks, Wade. And thanks King Island community for supporting Eastern Line over the last 6 years. It's very much appreciated, and we do appreciate your business, so thanks very much. As far as Eastern Line Shipping is concerned, it's been quite a struggle over the last 6 years due to the fact that we've been competing with BIL, which is a government body, which makes it very hard. They've got endless supply of resources where a private company like our own hasn't. It has been a big challenge and it's been a big battle. We had a meeting there last week with a couple of the executive side of Tasports to discuss a few things in regards to the 10-year plan for Stanley, the upgrade of Stanley, so we can get more utilisation out of the actual Ro-Ro ramp there. That was met with a few curly ones, so to speak. And we did touch on the idea of potentially taking over Bass Island Line. And the question was, do you want the boat? And I pretty well much said no. And they said, well, how much better off would we be? So it was a bit of a type of thing. The boat itself, to give you a bit of background, Tasports was looking to go and buy and was at the market to buy our vessel, but we beat them to it. So The difference between the two vessels, ours is a heavy roll-on, roll-off vessel, which is designed for heavier going, for heavier weather, opposed to their vessel. What else can I say? I don't really know, Wade.
Well, maybe tell us a little bit about the involvement that Eastern Line Shipping has with the island. Because Testport says we're a commercial entity and that's it. You pay your price and that's it. How much does Eastern Line Shipping care, if we can call it like that, for the island?
We care a lot. We care a lot. We've got, you guys, as far as our business is concerned, you equate to 75 to 80% of our business complete. So what you guys say and what you guys want makes a big deal to how we act and how we actually run our business. For the last 6 years, we started off, to give you some sort of idea, we started off one little talk liner per week would come over here. We're up to now 3 to 4 talk liners between a fortnight period. So it just goes to show how much has grown, and the service, I suppose, that we give, we try to do our best. We've still got a long way to go, don't get me wrong, we're not perfect, but we do try. And when you ring Eastern Line, you're actually talking to a human being. You're not talking to somebody that's been groomed in that executive side where it sounds like it's a tape recording. So,
Is Eastern Line Shipping profitable?
yes.
So
Yes,
does that mean...
if we lost the money that Bass Island Line loses, we would have been out of business years ago. So we can run a profitable business, and there's not a lot in it, there's not huge amounts, but we are profitable. We are gaining in the market. We can afford to update the gear when the money's there, but we like to try to keep our pricing down for you guys, so it becomes a little bit easier for you. We understand the fight that you are up against, and we try our best to help you out.
Is it, a lot of people would say, well, it's maybe better that we have a company running the shipping that is sort of supported by the government, because a commercial entity could go broke. Your thoughts on that?
We had a conversation with Bass Island Line a while ago. I've got to be careful because I can't say a great deal about it, but they said the same thing. Okay, now we've been there for the last 6 years and we've turned a profit every year. So we've got a few runs on the board, so to speak. We haven't got the overheads that they do. And we run things a little bit different. We actually utilise our vessel a little bit better than what they did. As they were saying there, with coming back from Melbourne, they were half empty. We wouldn't do that. We'd make sure that we're going over with a full boat. And that's hard for you guys wanting a direct link to Victoria, because because we're a private company, we've got to make sure that our vessel is utilised to the best of its ability.
Warren Dick, thank you very much for your time.